Hello viewers, myself is Dr. Neeta and you are watching my channel Learn Literature with Dr. Neeta. So let us begin today's topic. Welcome to yet another video on literary theories, and today we would discuss about post-structuralism. If you wish to study post-structuralism, then you will have to understand what structuralism is, and for that purpose you will have to see my previous video on structuralism. Now you must have seen that post-structuralism has been written in books in two forms. One is with hyphen, that is post-structuralism. Another is post-structuralism. Now, though they are used one in place of the other, but still according to certain critics, according to a few critics, there is a difference between this post-structuralism with a dash and post-structuralism without a dash. So, according to some scholars, there is a difference between post-structuralism with a hyphen and post-structuralism without a hyphen. Post-structuralism can be taken to mean anything after structuralism. If there is a dash, it is indicative of the fact that this period is indicating something after structuralism. It means this with the dash is indicative of a particular time period which is after structuralism, while this post-structuralism without hyphen is often used to a body of work with certain common features, principles, arguments, procedures and even writing styles. It means post-structuralism without hyphen is indicative of certain common features and arguments that were shared by a body of work of that particular period. So, now origin of post-structuralism. One thing you should keep in mind before starting post-structuralism, that some of the critics which you studied in structuralism with the passage of time converted to post-structuralist, and what were those situations, I would discuss them in detail in this video. Post-structuralism was an intellectual movement that emerged in France, affecting the branches of knowledge like philosophy and humanities during 1960s and 70s. So, it emerged in France. Post-structuralism both builds upon and rejects the ideas established by structuralism. So, sometimes it seems to be the continuation of structuralism, or at other times it seems to be a reaction to structuralism. Sometimes it is favoring certain things of structuralism and moving them forward, and some of the actions of post-structuralist like a reaction to structuralism. By 1950s, theory of structuralism propounded by Ferdinand de Saussure on the linguistics began to be adopted in anthropology by Levi-Strauss, in psychoanalysis by Lacan, and in literary theory by Roland Barthes. So, this is the popularity of the theory of structuralism that was propounded by Ferdinand de Saussure. It was in the field of linguistics, but the basic tenets of the theory began to be adopted in each and every field of knowledge, and mainly in anthropology it was adopted. This theory of structuralism was adopted by Levi-Strauss and by Lacan in psychoanalysis, and in literary theory it was adopted by Roland Barthes. But by the late 1960s, the structuralist theory began to be opposed by the thinkers like Roland Barthes. As I told you, Roland Barthes was a structuralist, but later on he turned to be a post-structuralist. Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault and Louis Althusser, and these theorists were referred as post-structuralists. It means those who opposed or those who added something to structuralism, they were called post-structuralist. So, they were Roland Barthes, Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault and Louis Althusser. Now, perhaps you may understand structuralism, but still to continue the idea, I am giving you a brief of structuralism. So, it was a theory that was developed by Ferdinand de Saussure in the field of linguistics, according to which he says that language also has a structure. This theory assumes literature is modeled on the structure of language. According to structuralists, the literature was interpreted in terms of language, because they considered, structuralists considered that merely the text of the thing is significant. So, they analyze the thing on the basis of the structure of the language, because they thought that the language itself has its in itself is complete, reflective of whole of the structure, and we have to set the piece of literature in that piece of text in that particular grand structure of a language or that particular genre. The structuralists argue that the meaning of the text is not determined by individual, either by author or by the reader. They say that author and reader are not going to do anything with the meaning. So, from where the meaning of the text would come according to structuralists? They said that by the system or structure which governs the individual. It means they were talking about the structure, and if you wish to understand structuralism in a proper way, go through the previous video, there you would easily come to know regarding the structure. So, structure that governs the individual, that would give you the meaning. It means they were not at all worried about the context of the literature. Structuralists were not interested about the significance of author or the significance of the reader, and they were not worried about the context in which the literature or the text was written. The theory of structuralism was modeled on the concept of sign, signifier and signified, and for example, if we are saying the word tree, it is written or it is spoken by someone, it works as a signifier, and the concept which is coming into the mind of the reader or the listener is the signified, and it is represented through the sign which we usually use in the language. So, this is the concept which I dealt with in detail in my video of structuralism. The concept of binary opposite was also suggested by the structuralists, and they asserted that to understand something, to understand the meaning of something, we have to make others understand by the way of binary opposite. For example, if you wish to understand the meaning, according to structuralist I am talking to you, if you want to understand the meaning of this word man, then we would have to tell what man is. It means man is one who is not a woman. It means through this binary opposite we are making the meaning of this word clear, or we are making the meaning of this word clear with the help of this binary opposite. So, if we wish to understand the meaning of word black or the color black, we will have to say that which is not white. It means we have to just make the meaning of the thing clear by its binary opposite. It is the accepted way which structuralists think is adopted by in understanding a piece of literature. Now, what different approach these post-structuralists were having? The idea of structuralism drew the interest of scholars of University of the United States. As I told you that structuralism was a movement in France, but the idea of structuralism drew the attention of the scholars of the University of United States. So, when they were interested in learning the idea of structuralism, they held a conference. That conference was held at the Johns Hopkins University in 1966, and for the expert opinion, Some prominent structuralists were called in that conference for their deliberation, for their expert opinion on structuralism, and they included Claude Lévi-Strauss, Louis Althusser, Jacques Lacan, and Roland Barthes and Derrida. They all were invited to that conference. Now, they delivered the lecture there, and then they tried to make the scholars at the University of United States understand the idea of structuralism. But when they were describing that structuralism, something was added to structuralism, and some of the points deviated from structuralism, and from there onward the origin of post-structuralism took place. Derrida delivered his famous lecture Structure, Sign and Play in the Human Sciences at that conference. It seems to be a statement against structuralism. So, Derrida's lecture was the beginning of post-structuralism. You may say that he said something which was against structuralism, though he was called there to express his deliberations on structuralism, but what he delivered here was against structuralism. In the essay, Derrida discussed the theoretical limitation to structuralism. There, in the paper, he described some limitations to structuralism and also attempted to theorize the terms that were no longer structuralist. Though he was describing structuralism, but in that structuralism, he was talking about something, he was talking about certain terms, he was trying to theorize those terms, but they were no longer structuralist. Other scholars too presented their views regarding structuralism, and these views cumulatively laid the foundation of post-structuralism. Now, we would talk about Roland Barthes. According to Barthes, structuralism is not the end, but it can be further explained. As I told you, some of the scholars were just adding something to structuralism, and some were raising certain objection against structuralism. So, Roland Barthes was one of the critics who said that structuralism is not the end, but it can be further explained in a way that it may lead to contradictory positions. It was originally, he was originally a structuralist, but during the 1960s he turned to post-structuralism. With the publication of his famous work, The Death of the Author, in an American journal, Aspen, in 1968, Roland Barthes established himself as a post-structuralist. He separated the author from his sense of authority. This book is quite famous, and when he is talking about the death of the author, it does not mean the real death. Rather, he is saying he is separating the author from his sense of authority. It means previously it was considered that a text is written by the author, and author has got each and every right to that work. But Roland Barthes in his book The Death of the Author declared that the author is no more the authority. According to him, the author is merely the scripter. He is writing a script, and the scripter exists only to produce but not to explain the work. So, he made the thing clear that the scripter has to just produce something, but he has got no right to give the meaning to that thing, to explain that work. It means it does not matter in what sense the author has written the thing. In his opinion, to give a text an author and assign a single corresponding interpretation is to impose a limit on that text. So, as I told you, structuralists were mainly interested in text, and they said that whole of the meaning can be interpreted through text. So, he says if someone is saying that this is the author and author has got the right to draw the meaning, or he has got the right to express whatever he wanted to, whatever he has put into that text, if he has got that opportunity, then there would be a single meaning of the text, and that would be according to the author. But according to Roland Barthes, it would not be a good thing, in his opinion, to give a text an author. It means if the text is going to be interpreted merely by an author and assign a single corresponding interpretation to it, and we are having a single interpretation to that text, it is to impose a limit on that text. In that case, you are imposing a certain limit on the text, and it would not be right according to him. In simple words, he asserted that author has no relation with the text. Once it has been written, the text becomes independent and gains autonomy. In this respect, he seems to be with new critics who maintain the text must be analyzed not by considering author's intention, but the structure of the text. So, he just said the author is dead. It means now the text is in the hands of the readers and they can draw their own meanings. Author is merely a scripter, and after writing the book, he has got no right to say about the meaning of that text. Barthes was against the traditional literary criticism practice of considering the aspect of author's identity. He was against author's identity. He was not at all interested in his political views, historical context, religion, psychology, or other biographical or personal attribute to trace the meaning from his work. He was of the opinion that all the context, whether it is historical or religious or his biographical detail, these things have nothing to do with the explanation of the text according to Roland Barthes. So, he never considered author's identity to be important. He replaced the author by the reader. So, now in his opinion, reader is significant. A reader is the one as the primary subject of inquiry who would try to understand the meaning of the text. This process was called destabilizing or decentering of the author, because author is now no more the center of the text. Rather, the reader is the center of the text. Reader would decide what would be the meaning of this text. Like other post-structuralists, he rejected the idea that a literary text has a single meaning or purpose and asserted that every reader creates his or her own meaning of the text. So, when the meaning is depending on the reader, then the reader would read any text with his own perspective, with his own ideology, with his own preoccupations, with his own cultural background, then every reader would have a different meaning. Roland Barthes was of the same opinion that every reader creates his or her own meaning of the text. In this way, the text has a multiple meanings. It means the text could be interpreted in a number of ways. Barthes compared text and textile. To make us understand the real meaning, he compared text and textile and declared that text is a tissue or a piece of fabric of quotation, in which certain quotations have been given. It is text is like a tissue, text is like a fabric, in which a number of quotations have been woven together, drawn from the innumerable centers of culture. From where these quotations have come? These quotations have been drawn by the writer from the innumerable centers of culture rather than from one individual experience. So, he was of the opinion that the writer has drawn the different quotations in the text from the different centers of culture, and it was not his individual experience, because like structuralists, he used to think that language also has got its own structure. Now, another famous critic of post-structuralism is Jacques Derrida, and his philosophy or theory of deconstruction is very famous. So, post-structuralism is also closely associated with Jacques Derrida. He was a French philosopher and is famous for his theory of deconstruction, which emphasized the concept of unstable, unfixed meanings as it functioned in language. So, he is talking about deconstruction. It is quite a famous theory. Now, his lecture, Structure, Sign and Play in Discourse of Human Sciences, presented at the Johns Hopkins International Conference in 1966, is often thought to be the starting point of post-structuralism, that I also told you in my previous slide. In the essay, classical mode of thinking has been contrasted with post-structuralist way of thinking, and a critique of structuralism was presented by raising the issue of structurality of a structure. Now, he was just welcomed at America to present his lecture on structuralism, and he gave his lecture on structuralism, but his critique of structuralism was presented in such a way that it raised a number of issues about structuralism. Derrida criticizes structuralism on the following points. He argued that structuralist theory gave more importance to the structural elements of a system than the content or meaning of the system. So, he says that the structuralists are merely thinking about the structure of the language. They are merely thinking about the structural element of a system. They are not at all worried about the content or the meaning of the system. This leads to the reductionist view of human behavior and culture. And if they are doing like that, they are not thinking about meaning or the content, it means they are neglecting human behavior and human culture. In this way, human beings become merely passive receivers of the meaning, and if they are negating it, if they are having this reductionist view, in that case human beings will become merely passive receivers of the meaning rather than the active agents who contribute to the creation and interpretation of meaning. So, he was also of the same opinion as Roll-Abbas that the reader is an active agent who would draw or create meaning. But if whole of the importance is given to the structural element, then human behavior and culture would get neglected, and in that manner human being would remain merely passive receivers. They would not be active agents who can create and interpret meaning. His next argument was that structuralist theories often ignore historical and contextual factors that shape and influence system and structure. So, he was not neglecting the fact that the things are not having a structure. He was okay with that fact that the things are having a system, language is also having a system and a structure. He was okay with that fact, but he says that the structuralists are completely ignoring the historical and contextual factors. While according to Jacques Derrida, these historical and contextual factors shape and influence the structure which is going to be studied by structuralists, and this can lead to a view of structures as timeless and universal rather than being shaped by particular historical and cultural context in which they exist. So, he says if you are merely talking about structures, and if in this way the structures may remain timeless and universal, they would not change, because if there is change, the change is because of the cultural context, change is because of the change in the human behavior. So, it is very essential to study human behavior, historical context, and the cultural context of the thing. While the structuralist was not thinking about all these things, they were not thinking about the context, as I told you. Derrida argued that many structuralist theory mainly focused on language as the primary means of communication and meaning making. Right, argued that structuralists are focused merely on the use of the language. This can lead to the neglect of other forms of communication and meaning making. He said that for communication and meaning, only thing that is there is not language, rather communication is also done through gesture, through facial expression, through body language, and structuralists are not giving any importance to all these things. In that manner, the theory of structuralism does not does not appear to be quite foolproof to Jacques Derrida. Now, his concept of deconstruction. So, first we would learn what is deconstruction. According to Merriam-Webster dictionary, deconstruction does not actually mean demolition. Deconstruction doesn't mean demolition, it means to break down everything. It doesn't mean that. Instead, it means breaking down or analyzing something to discover its true significance, which is supposedly almost never exactly what the author intended. So, it is not the demolition or breaking down of something, rather it is breaking down and analyzing something. After breaking down, analyzing something, especially the words in the work of fiction and non-fiction. So, what we have to analyze? We are going to analyze the words in a work of fiction or non-fiction to discover its true significance, which is supposedly almost never exactly what the author intended. And when we are trying to discover, it doesn't matter what was the intention of the author. Author may have some different interpretation, but when we have broken down it to analyze something, then the different meaning would definitely come out. Derrida's main influence for the development of this theory was from the theorist Martin Heidegger, who in his work called Being and Time talks about destructuring of the previous philosophical concepts such as time, history, matter in order to better understand them. Derrida was influenced by Martin Heidegger, and he was also influenced by Nietzschean critique of metaphysics of concept of being and truth. Derrida is of the opinion that deconstruction is concerned not with the discovery of truth or of distilling correct conclusion, but rather the process of questioning itself. So, what is deconstruction? Deconstruction is a process in which we are destructuring something. We are trying to open up something or the different elements of a thing in such a way that we may understand whole of the process by which the things or the text has come out. We are not going to make any discovery of truth in deconstruction, rather we are trying to understand whole of the process by questioning the text by that. And when we are not trying to draw any conclusion, but we are trying to understand the process of questioning, but rather with the process of questioning, we are questioning it, okay, how the thing is in that manner, how the thing is in that manner. So, when we are trying to find out that process in that manner, and everyone is having his own process of questioning, that is why the multiple truths may come out from the same text. Deconstruction opens up possibilities that have been suppressed by virtue of dominance of the particular philosophical tradition. Binary opposites the tradition which was established by structuralists. So, deconstruction opens up possibilities, it means new possibilities would come out and new meanings would come out which were suppressed by the virtue of dominance. So, virtue of dominance, it means you may understand it like that For example, you are studying a particular text, and the text has been interpreted by a number of critics, and they have pointed out certain things in that text, that the text is talking about, for example, the patriotism. Someone has said that the text is related to patriotism. Another one is saying that the text is talking about the Indian families. But if you are going through the text, you all of a sudden you come to know that here the people are patriots, no doubt. People, the family structure has been shown, but even that family structure, the position of woman has also been critically analyzed. This you come to know when you are going to the process of questioning that text. You come to know a new meaning out of that. So when it came to you, when you have deconstructed the text, it means you just try to read it from a different angles, from the different angles. So someone has studied from one angle, that is patriotism. Another one has studied from the angle of the familial structure of that particular country, and you are studying the position of woman. Someone else is studying with the position of subalterns, etc. So deconstruction is such a theory that it would not be very easy for me to define each and everything in this video. So we would make a separate video on it if I get time. But the idea that I want to make you clear, I think it would be clear. The key terms used by Derrida are the logocentrism, phallocentrism, metaphysics of presence, aporia and deference, etc. So application of post-structuralism. This theory aims at exposing the gaps, the confusions, the contradiction in the discourse, and how a text undermines itself. First of all, a flaw is discerned in the text. We try to find out what is missing in that, what is the gap in that, and then the hidden articulation are revealed by exploring text, opposition, reversal and ambiguities. And when we try to find out the ambiguities and the oppositions we explore them, and a new meaning comes out. For this purpose, a careful reading with creativity is needed. And when can it be done? When we are making a careful reading and we are creative. Of course, creativity is there, and we are trying to find out certain new meanings in the text. And what today is going on, because of this approach, even when we are talking about Shakespeare, we are trying to find out certain new meanings from that. So the text says something different than what it appears to say. So when we are reading it with carefully reading with creativity, it means we are not following a downtrodden path on which the others have moved. We are thinking about something new. We would definitely draw out a new meaning even from the old text. Now, the common features of structuralism and post-structuralism, how they are same. Both structuralism and post-structuralism place language at the center of the world view and views it closed and self-standing system. Both of them are focusing on the language that is used, as they both follow Saussure's linguistic theory. They both claim, it means post-structuralism and structuralism, that language is rather to be seen as a system of sign existing independently from both the mind and physical reality. It means language is important and it is a system of sign. It is a common feature of structuralism and post-structuralism. They both keep the author away from the study of the text. So both structuralist and post-structuralist do not want to involve author in the interpretation of text. Now, what is the difference between structuralism and post-structuralism? Structuralism regarded language as a closed system of signifier and signified, while post-structuralists identified certain gaps between signifier and signified. Signifier means what is written and signified what idea you are making. Structuralism makes use of binary opposites such as male, female, day, night, east, west, etc. to understand any structure. These terms are often arranged in order of hierarchy. While post-structuralists reject this concept because why they reject it? Because that the dominant word in the pair is dependent on its interior or counterparts. So, they feel, post-structural feel that when we are talking about male and female, day and night, it is in this combination one word is dominant. In day and night, day is dominant, male and female, male is dominant, east and west, east is prominent. So, that is why they reject this concept, because dominant in one pair is dominant and another then another pair. So, they reject this concept of binary opposite. They rejected this concept of signifier and signified, or rather they accepted the concept, but they tried to find out certain gaps in it, and those gaps are giving the new meaning, and similarly they have rejected the concept of binary opposite. Structuralists argue that meaning of the text is separate from the culture and history, that I told you that it is meaning does not depend on the culture and history. Post-structuralists argued against this view and maintained the persons are culturally and discursively structured. Their history and culture have the impact on the persons, and that is why they are significant. Structuralism reaches the meaning of the text through linguistic analysis, because they are mainly focused on the linguistic analysis to show there is a common and central meaning to all the cultures. They are saying that all cultures or human mind works in the same manner. There are certain universal truths. They are talking about those things and after analyzing the things linguistically. While post-structuralists also find the meaning of the text through its linguistic analysis, language they are also using, but claim that there is no common or central meaning. They are not talking about a central or common meaning. They argue there cannot be a universal meaning, and the meaning of a specific sign may differ from culture to culture. So, signifier and signified, I have expressed that idea in my previous video, that from culture to culture the meaning of the sign may change. For example, there is a signifier and at another place there is signified, and the sign is there. So, it does not matter that the sign which is there in English language would give the same meaning in other culture. So, that if they are not same, then how the meaning would be the same. This is the plea of post-structuralist. Now, strengths and weaknesses of post-structuralism. Strength, freedom to view a piece of literature from open perspective. They used to see it from open perspective. Find alternate meanings. They are talking about a number of meanings of the text through individual analysis. Has the opportunity to be more insightful, and they are more, because after being more insightful they can find out a number of meanings. And what are the weaknesses of post-structuralism? The message of the text could be lost due to various interpretation. If everyone is having his or her own interpretation, sometimes what happen, the real message of the text would get lost. Some questioning may turn to be illogical. Sometimes they were saying that you should always be questioning the process. So, sometimes the questioning may be illogical. Some people may have illogical questioning, and when questioning is illogical, no proper answer can be found, and this would mash up each and everything. So, I think you would be able to understand post-structuralism, and after that there is the second part of post-structuralism also, and I would let you know about the other critics in that part. So, definitely see the second part of post-structuralism. So, thanks for your patience listening.